I'm thinking that from the border points that you've mentioned, it's quite a long one and they're very porous. I'm thinking even resource allocation will not be the only solution. Are you considering community border policing so that it's the community who informs you whether the people are passing there? Because even if you deploy the boots on the ground, that's an extremely long border point, which is very porous.
Of course, the community has to be uploaded. Even these cases that we are talking about, I think most of them were identified and noted courtesy of the community along the border, and including the chiefs and just the local people who, having been sensitized about the issue of COVID and having heard that in Tanzania there are cases but their president is not willing to quarantine anyone, I think our community has been very alert. And this is how these people have been identified and have been known to have either traveled to Tanzania or come from Tanzania. And they have alerted the authorities, and these people have been traced and then tested, and some of them taken to this quarantine. So I think the community is very alert, except that, you know, why we are still talking about the beefing up of the security. I may want to alert you, brother, that sometimes if you leave things to community, you know, at some stage, when they get to feel like maybe the government is not doing much or they are on their own, you can imagine the chaos that some of them can actually cause. So we are appealing as leaders. We know they have done well and they are still continuing to do well, but we are appealing as leaders so that our security apparatus is proper, so that we don't end up with cases where maybe somebody is harassed because they came from Tanzania. We want it to be held done in a professional manner and with the security organs around to assist all the time. So we know there might be a serious strain, but you see, when the other side is not doing anything, it only calls for us. For example, if I have a neighbor, we have good relations, but then he does something to his children which is fatal, it's upon me to now take care of my children on my side, and that may call for double effort because the neighbor is become outrageous and maybe poisoning his own children. I will not allow them to also kill my children. I have to double the effort. That's why I was the other day, if you listen to me, I was even appealing that if possible, we could be beefed up using the GSU to help us man some of these places which the regular police and the border team may not be able to handle.
So what are you suggesting? Should there be a cessation of movement cross-border?
If possible, a temporal one could actually do, because we are hoping that this corona will be managed, and even as we embark on teaching people more ways of helping themselves and trying to cope with it, we can do this temporal stoppage of movement, especially of Kenyans going to Tanzania for whatever reason. For example, some of them along the border there, you know, families have got their members on Kenyan side and on the Tanzanian side. So we can strictly curtail this movement. We saw nations close their borders, and even as we sit here today, we are not receiving international flights from anywhere because we have closed our border in a way. So I think even this one where people can walk on foot and cross over, somebody gives you reasons like they lost a loved one on the other side and they have to go for burial and things like that. We can temporarily stop this. I really think it will not really cause any harm because it is not something permanent. It is something that is just a measure to protect and cushion our vulnerable people from further infection and spread of the disease.
But what about the cross-border trade? Because there are those who say that's what they depend on. Have you mapped out the vulnerable people?
Of course, with that strictness, only those that are essential. For example, we have seen Uganda on the Busia and the side of Kenya. They are doing a serious scrutiny just to make sure that whoever is getting in with a lorry of goods or whatever it is. But you see, if we allow everybody else to come in the name of the trade, in fact, some of these people, I think the other day I heard that one of them was even traced all the way to Kisumu in the name of trade. So what would be of value? Do we kill our people and continue with trade, or we protect our people first and then continue with the trade later?
But have we mapped out the people?
Even these traders we know there is that dependency. There are maize coming from Tanzania, fruits and things like that, and other things coming to Kenya, from Kenya to Tanzania. But if there is a need to check these people at all places, because major ones come from the known borders like Sirare or Isebania. But I've counted a number of panya routes that I want you to know, like this place I'm calling Kitabaye. It's a one-stop border. Kopanga is a one-stop border, and even Nyamitiro is a one-spot border. But it's like not. It's loosely guarded. It is loosely guarded, and it is this strictness that we can say, okay, maybe whoever must come through this place, and before they cross, they are tested and their condition verified whether they are free of COVID or not. I think that's what we are talking about.
Okay, so right now as we stand, have we mapped out the people who are most vulnerable by the border point, especially the Kenyan side, who may need a bit of support should that cessation of movement come in place?
A lot of people along that border there are vulnerable, especially the elderly, the persons with disability, and even like in Nyatike, I'm very much worried about the people of Nyatike, because Nyatike has been suffering the floods since last year, and people have not been reaping anything there. So the truth is, these guys in Muhuru and almost the entire Nyatike constituency, a section of Suna West, and even the Koreans along the border there are families which are actually very vulnerable and may need support. And that's why we were also saying in our statement that we appreciate what the government has done so far, especially like the Nyatike I'm talking about. We are aware that about some 500 to 700 bags of rice has been taken there to help the people, but mainly it was targeting the flood victims along such places like Modi, Kabuto, Nyora, and the rest. And there are even more. It's like that food they are given once, and then the rest of the days, kila mtu anajitetea. And it is what is causing this harassment and movement all over the place to look for food. And that's why we were appealing to the government that if it is possible, we need to double this effort and increase the frequency of releasing this food help so that our people can be cushioned.
So we'll talk about the flooding situation in just a bit. But for now, because there's still movement within that border, the porous border points, what are you suggesting as we speak? Is it better to isolate and test, or test and trace? Because if we're isolating and testing, then it means the numbers will be exponential. But if we're testing and then tracing later on, should they test positive, then that may be manageable, but there's a risk of it spreading in the community. So isolation and testing, or testing and tracing, which one works best now for that porous border point?
That porous border point, for example, anybody who is crossing, especially from the Tanzanian side, to me, I think they need to be isolated immediately, rather than waiting that they pass and then they are traced later, and whoever else has that would seriously compromise the situation of the rate of infection, and everybody else will get it. And that is what we are fearing. But even isolation and testing, like everybody along that border, whoever is attempting to come in, I strongly feel that they should be tested before they get anywhere. And if they are found to be positive, then if they are Tanzanians, then they are barred from getting in. If they are Kenyans, then they are isolated just before they get in to contact with their families.
And
so
finally,
both ways, I think, should work for this border.
And finally,